Okay, let's begin. The date is November 28th, 2023. And welcome, both of you. I'm joined today by Alexandra Tzilivaki and Oliver Mai-Kolerus. My name is Kim Mason. I'm the Equal Opportunity and Diversity Officer at the Cluster of Excellence NeuroCure at the Charité. And today we are going to talk about Alexandra's journey from Greece to Berlin as a disabled person to do her PhD in the lab of Dietmar Schmitz through the Einstein Center for Neurosciences. And Alexandra is with us today as the PhD student who got the scholarship, and Oliver is here today as the administrative coordinator of the Einstein Center for Neurosciences Berlin. So today we're going to look at what this process was like from two perspectives. So from the perspective of the scientist and from the perspective of the administrative side. So we'll start with Alexandra. Alexandra, as an early career scientist, you are already very accomplished and you've received many awards, including in 2014 the Onassis Award as one of the young scientists who were selected to attend the Lindau Nobel Laureate meeting in Physiology and Medicine, and also a scholarship from the Vardionoyanis Foundation. Also in 2015, the Google Europe Scholarship for Students with Disabilities. And in 2018, you received the Onassis Award as the best postgraduate student in the Department of Biology at the University of Crete. And also, you were named as one of the next generation women leaders in Europe by McKinsey & Company. And more recently, and closer to where we are now, here in Berlin, you were awarded the Brenda Milner Award from the SFB 1315 in 2023 in recognition of your achievements as a brilliant young scientist. So we're very honored to have you with us today. Can you tell us what your current position is in Berlin and what your research focus is?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kim. It's a pleasure to be here today talking to you and Oliver. And thank you very much for the very, very kind introduction. I'm honored. I'm Alexandra Tzilivaki. I'm working with the team of Professor Dietmar Schmitz here in Charité. My passion is to understand what GABAergic interneurons are doing in the mammalian brain in order to enable to learn and to remember. I am constructing detailed biophysical models. My specialization is on computational neuroscience at different levels of abstraction, namely at the single cell level, where I'm interested in the way that dendrites translate incoming inputs, at the microcircuit level and at large-scale networks, where I want to understand why we need such a diversity in interneuron cell types and what is their role in memory-related oscillations.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. So diversity is also very important at the neuron level. That's interesting.
Necessary. I would say necessary and pivotal. And I think this is where is the magic thing with the brain, that the brain is the most diverse organ, the most plastic organ, and the most flexible organ in our bodies. And I think that in order to study it, we have to be diverse and flexible as well.
Alexandra, can you tell us something about your background, where you came from, maybe some things about your personal background and your training background?
Yeah, gladly. I'm from Greece, from the island of Crete. I was born and raised up in Chania, a beautiful small hometown. And at the age of 6 months, I was diagnosed with a severe motor neuron disease called spinal muscular atrophy, type 2. And since then, I use a wheelchair and I can move only a little bit my hands and head. So that motivated me. I would become a scientist. I want to understand what is going on there, So after finishing school in Chania, I moved a few hundreds of kilometers far away. That was the first challenge of starting being a student with a wheelchair back then in Greece, and I obtained my bachelor degrees in molecular biology and biotechnology from the University of Crete, based in Heraklion. And then later on, I also obtained my master's degree, also in molecular biology and biomedicine. So you see that my theoretical background is in molecular biology and experimental biology. However, from the age of 21, I realized that I want to become a researcher, a brain scientist. And I knew I couldn't understand to what extent by that time. I was naive, and that helped me later. But I knew that I would have to overcome some obstacles during my career. So I thought, okay, I need a good CV. So I started and I entered a great lab of Yota Poirasi, my former advisor in Greece, where I started modeling neurons, and memory processing with computers at the age of 21 until I moved here in Berlin.
What motivated you to apply for a fellowship through the Einstein Center for Neurosciences Berlin?
Well, apparently when I was in the middle of my master's degree, I made the decision that I will live abroad. This decision was driven based of two factors. The first factor is, of course, the best quality of life and social benefits for people with severe disabilities like me. We know that life as a scientist is challenging, right? So imagine that when you use a wheelchair. So I wanted to make sure that I will be able and free to do my research. And for that, I was willing from an early age to go abroad alone. That was the first factor. The second factor is you need mobility to do good science, right? You need mobility. Why? Because we have to move. We have to show in our CV that we are independent enough and we can work with different groups and different people. But I don't see it only like that. I think that mobility in science, especially in the first years, is very important because it enables us to sit down together with people from different cultures, with different perspectives, and study the brain. I mean, it helps the scientists to think differently. So Berlin was the ideal place that combined both. And then I found about the Einstein Center of Neuroscience. It was the first call, the first cohort. And then I applied. And a few months later, I came to Berlin for an interview.
And so what was your selection symposium experience like? I remember you then too, Alexandra. That was the first time that we met, because I was assisting with the symposium that time. What was your experience of that event like? Did you feel that there were any barriers to participation that could not be overcome, or were there particular stumbling blocks during the way?
No. I think it was a great experience. I remember it with very, very good feelings. I stayed in Berlin for a few days. Very important days for my life. It was the beginning. I didn't know what would be next. I couldn't imagine. But that days, the symposium, the people from the Einstein Center for Neurosciences, from the NeuroCure as well, all helped me. So it was a very, very, very nice experience for me. Totally barrier-free, totally stateless.
That's great. I think a key for that is good communication also, is you being able to tell us what you need and people being open and willing to respond to that.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you got the symposium, when you were notified?
Emotional. I remember that feeling that life is changing now. A new chapter begins. Very nice moments. I was very motivated.
When you describe it, I can really feel what that must have been like for you at that time. But then the next step was indeed filled with all kinds of practical concerns and steps that needed to be taken. So now we're going to talk about the practical process of coming from Greece to Berlin. And Alexandra and Oliver, you both experienced this journey from different perspectives. I'd like to ask you both about your experiences with this. So, Alexandra, we'll stay with you again for the moment. What were your expectations or your imaginations about what this process would be like, and how long did you think it would last?
I was naive. I thought it's going to work with a magic click. And I thought, okay, I'm going to Germany. It's easy. It's not that difficult for a disabled person from abroad, like in Greece. So I was preparing. I remember that I informed my landlord in Heraklion that I'm leaving. I had a party with friends. I informed my mentor there, my colleagues. Everyone was saying goodbye. My mom and dad were already emotional. And then I remember it was one day, someone called me from Einstein, and there were some small obstacles over there. So it was not possible for me to move in October 2017 together with the other fellows to start my PhD. It was a shock. So the challenge started that day.
Oliver, maybe can you tell us first of all how long you have been at the Einstein Center for Neurosciences and something about your current position?
Thanks, Kim. So I started working at the Einstein Center for Neuroscience as an administrative coordinator in 2017. So this was after Alexandra's successful application to our center. So we are very interdisciplinary and very interinstitutional neuroscientific research center. Our PI work in fields starting on one side from philosophy and linguistics and ranging on the other side to neurology and molecular biology. So it's the largest neuroscientific network in Berlin. But we're not only a network, we are also a graduate study center and a scholarship program for PhD students with a strong focus on open innovation in science, for which we even have been awarded in 2020.
Thank you for that explanation. So, as a person who's responsible on the one hand for being part of the selecting committee and also for onboarding, you're involved at that point where you're helping the new students with getting here. So they're coming from different countries and they may be faced with different visa issues or different starting times or all kinds of different situations. So what was your expectation from the administrative side about how it would go assisting Alexandra in coming from Crete in Greece to Berlin?
So when I learned about your case, I was like, sounds like a challenge. And I did expect a lot of bureaucracy to manage. What I did not expect was that nobody else tried to get a disabled person from Greece to Germany. So there was no blueprint for it. We had actually learned everything from the scratch because there was close to zero help from all the officials. So the Schwerbehindertenbeauftragte of the Charité only would help for situations at work, but not to get somebody here to Germany, get a person settled. Nobody could help us with this. A lot of people were really interested in how this would work. And they tried to make suggestions, try this, try that, but in the end we had to figure out all by ourselves. It was much more time-consuming than expected. So I just, an hour ago, I read an old email where I was sending you the timeline. And it was like, do this in 2 weeks and this in 4 weeks. And then 6 months later, you can come to Germany. After we learned that it was not possible to get Alexandra here in 2017, like all the other students, we were thinking, 1 year later. So she joins the center 1 year later, and this is still with a lot of buffer time. So in the end, it took 3 years, 4 years?
4.5 years.
4.5 years. So definitely nobody expected this. I mean, there was COVID in between also. The start, this was also a bit of a struggle, but actually not a game changer. So this was really figuring out what was working, what not. And a lot of people were involved. So from our side, and so everyone in the office was working for Alexandra at one point or the other. We hired student assistants just for her. And then you had the people at the Charité who were involved at some point, the health insurance, the social institutions, companies who provide nursing, people who own flats for rent, clerks at the ministries. So yeah, it was a really, really long and hard process, and I did not expect that.
Wow. Okay. So now, Alexandra, I'm coming back to you. Do you remember what were the first steps that you had to take from a practical point of view to get here? And also, along the way, what some of the most important steps were?
From the time period between October 2017 until, I think, February 2018, it was a bit chaotic. We had no idea what it is going on. And I remember that time it was extremely difficult for me psychologically, and all the other 4 years, and I will tell you why. Then I came in Berlin, and then my mentor, my advisor currently, Professor Dietmar Schmitz, came, and literally he took me under his wings. And by that time, he was the director of the Einstein Center for Neuroscience as well. So, thanks to Dietmar's support, I remember that I was ready to quit. But Dietmar told me, there are no problems. There are only challenges. We will do it. So this is why I stayed. And because I'm crazy stubborn, that helped. And it is what Oliver said. The first obstacle was the lack of knowledge. We did not know where to search, where to ask for help, where to ask for advice. I couldn't believe. I knew that I'm sometimes a bit crazy and innovative, and I want to do things that are difficult, take a wheelchair and move to another country and do excellent science. It's not an everyday thing. But I was sure for a reason, I was naive, that everyone has done it before, so there must be a way. No. So we had to understand what it is going on. What are the rules? What we should apply for? I remember myself, I was in Greece. Then officially I started working as a PhD student for Charité for Dietmar in 2018, in 2018, not in 2017. And I was hosted in Greece at my previous institute. I had to find a way to continue my life in Germany. First challenge. Second challenge, I had to remain psychologically okay because my mental health was not good at the time, and I had to remain productive and keep my academic excellence, keep my CV going, because PhD is a very important time period for every scientist. So for me, I just didn't have the option to take a breath or to only focus to my transmission to Berlin. I had also to work and remain excellent. So it was very, very challenging. And on the other side, imagine a young person in one country that wants to go in another country that apparently works by distance for another country. I didn't know where I belong all these years, right? And I didn't know what the future will bring. We didn't know. It took us a lot of time to understand the process and then just go trial and error, and try to convince the state to give me financial aid for assistance. It was very, very challenging. It affected my personal life a lot. It affected my psychology a lot. What helped was my motivation, that I like interneurons very much, so I couldn't stop. and the fact that I was surrounded by people that supported me, by great mentors. Without Dietmar, I wouldn't be here today. And all the people in Einstein Center, as Oliver said, everyone knew me. Everyone helped in every way he could. And I'm really grateful for that. But moving abroad as a scientist, we are scientists. Our work is to do the research. I mean, the problem was bureaucratic and on the state, on the Europe. And I remember that I was trying to send emails everywhere I could to ask for help and be informed about what is the process. I remember I had opened the website of the European Union, and I just trying to find people in the diversity and equal rights. No one knew. There is no law that protects disabled professionals and scientists to move abroad. Germany's social benefits for disabled people are unique, and Germany is a role model of this, because it provides people a very generous amount of money every month to build their own team of personal assistants that they work to support the life of people in need with all the benefits from the states. But in order to be able to apply for that, you need to have an appropriate home, and you need to pay your health insurance in Germany for 24 months. So now tell me, how is it possible for a person to come from abroad, to start a new job, and in a magic way to already have paid health insurance, the employer, for 2 years? So that was the first contradiction, and that was the point that we understood that it's gonna take at least 2 years.
Oliver, what were the first or the most important steps that you, from an administrative perspective, needed to take, and how did you deal with this problem that Alexandra has just described?
Yeah, it was already the major recognition that she needed a work contract, which the Einstein Center could not provide because we only have scholarships, and we are also, at the time, were explicitly forbidden to make work contracts with PhD students. And so it took a few months to recognize what we need and that we couldn't give it. So we were really happy that the Cluster of Excellence NeuroCure stepped in and gave Alexandra a position, a work contract, because without this, it wouldn't be possible at all. Then we started the following processes, because she couldn't come to Berlin even with a contract because we didn't have a nursing for her, didn't have a flat. So this was the next thing we learned. So she needed to stay in Greece for a while. So we made an official Entsendung, so that she is as a Charité employee working in her old, or not department, but Pagnotta Polrazzi, in the lab that she was already familiar with. And she could be working, even though it's not Berlin, but she had a German work contract, and she paid into the German Pflegekasse, the German Sozialkasse, and the German Krankenkasse, so that all the times she needed to get into the German social welfare system counted already. And then the next big challenge was, I think, more Berlin-specific than just system-specific. She needed a flat. As we all know, getting a flat in Berlin is tough. Getting a flat for a disabled person who needs more space than just a single bedroom apartment, which is affordable and accessible by wheelchair, close to impossible. So I don't know how many, I think 2 years we were looking. Several people were visiting apartments and flats, and at some point in the outer skirts of Berlin we found a flat finally, and with a direct connection via tram from the flat to the Charité, which at least circumvented another problem in Berlin, so getting around in a wheelchair with public transportation. This was the two major things we had to achieve. And then, of course, a lot of, let's say, these minor things to organize all these different examinations. So I don't know, 3 or 4 times she had to be examined by the health insurance, by the Sozialamt, all with different foci, and nobody believed something. All had to see for themselves. I mean, she has an innate illness, and so every doctor who reads this knows what she would look like. But still, everyone had to see her for himself. This was, you had to organize the travels, you have to organize stays. At some point, we had to organize a flat. So it was not useless, but it felt unnecessary. And then even after we got her a flat and she got the final examination to get Pflegestufe, a lot of people had to come, and we had to do it twice, I think. Of course, we had to rebuttal the whole thing. So a lot of work nobody expected, and really, I doubt it was necessary.
It sounds like there was no road, and it sounds like you were both, from your respective sides, looking into a jungle and just trying to kind of make your path through this jungle and hope that you can sort of find a way to meet each other from where you were coming from. What an extraordinary experience. I'd like to ask both of you what things you think helped, what worked well. I know it was a difficult process, obviously, but what things made it go forward anyway? Alexandra.
I think that at the end, science won. For me, I did everything because I wanted to come and do nice science here. And I was lucky, as I said before, that I was supported by good people that didn't allow me to, in a way, to give up. Many times I thought that it's not going to work at all. But then, in a way, they made me feel that you will continue, we will continue. So I think that helped. And presumably the fact, as I said, that I'm very stubborn as a person and persistent, that sometimes help. Yeah, I will be honest, it was very difficult. It was very difficult. I remember in 2018, some people from the Medizin Berlin, they wanted to see me to see if I am eligible to apply for the financial help. It is called Persönliches Budget here in Germany, that support people with disabilities to hire and offer contracts for personal assistance. And on that days, I was accompanied by a friend of mine. She came with me to take care of me in Berlin. People in the ACN and Dietmar tried their best to make it as much convenient as it could be for me, my stay, and I'm grateful for that. But I remember myself keen. We were trying to find a flat, challenging. And then I wanted to go to the lab, to come here in Charité and discuss with colleagues. And I remember my friend telling me, no, you don't do science today. Please, let's go find the flat. Please, that's most important. It was everything, every kind of feeling was a lot, too much. And then I remember the day that I saw my flat in Hohenhausen. Everyone was coming, but not me in the first months. And they were writing me emails. You have a very nice flat, apparently. It has a very nice view. It is on the 7th floor. I am grateful to Oliver, to people from the Einstein Center, and to fellow colleagues that voluntarily they were going, because I had to put some furniture on an apartment that I have never been before. Because then the people from the state wanted to examine me in the place I live. Yeah? So I just make a flat out of nothing. It was only doors and windows. And I remember the day that I arrived and the first night, I was like, okay, finally, it exists. I couldn't believe it.
And Oliver, from your perspective, What things made a positive difference? What things helped you to continue moving forward?
So we continued forward basically because failing was not on the table. We didn't want to fail. There was so much work involved, we just didn't want this would be for nothing. What worked well, I think, was your first clerk at the Sozialamt. I forgot her name, because she knew who to approach and to get all the things done. She helped a lot. Unfortunately, after we got Alexandra a flat, she had to move to a different Sozialamt from Pankow to Lichtenberg, and these people there haven't been so forthcoming. And also there was a completely lack of trust for the work of the other Sozialamt, so they checked her case again. What also worked kind of well, at least for some time, were the companies for this personal budget, for this caring. So not because they were perfectly, there were also setbacks, but they knew the processes. So at least we could learn from them. And even if we didn't stop working with some of them for different reasons, so at least we learned something.
If you had to do it all over again, Alexandra, is there anything that you would do differently?
I have thought of that many times, yes. One major thing that I would have done differently is to all these 4 years of waiting to take life easier, because I didn't allow myself to enjoy life for 4 years. As I said before, it impacted me a lot, mentally, psychologically, and personally, because I didn't know where I belong. So it was like I had a luggage full of clothes ready to go, and two of the wheels of my wheelchair were in Berlin, and the rest 2 wheels of my wheelchair were in Greece. So I couldn't start doing stuff or making effort on other aspects. Yeah, I was living with a kind of box, like next year I'm going, next month I'm going. No, life it's not like that. And this is a major lesson learned on my side, to be adaptable, to be flexible, and if something is not good, to make it good in any way you can. Yeah. And I have to tell you something that not a lot of people, even the ones that know my story, know. It affected my health as well, all this situation, because at that time, for the first time, there was a new kind of therapy for my disability. No, I'm not going to walk, but at least it helps to remain young and beautiful. But I didn't have access to that medical therapy all these 4 years, because I was insured in Germany. But in order to have this therapy, I had to be in Berlin, to live there. So I decided to sacrifice my health for the PhD. Now I receive the therapy, and yeah.
I'm glad that you're getting the therapy now. And I'm glad that, there's an expression that sometimes the end justifies the means. I don't think we can say that here, but at least it wasn't for nothing. I think maybe we can say that. Oliver, from your perspective, is there anything that you would do differently or you would have done differently?
Of course, gained a lot of knowledge, and the first thing would be get her on a working contract as early as possible. We lost more than half a year before she was on a contract. And the next thing would be to get a flat more early, more urgently. In Berlin it's easy said. The situation got even worse in the last years. But the optimum would be having a flat for her and subletting the flat for 2 years. So, because it's a financial burden, Alexandra had to pay for 2 flats, one in Berlin and one in Heraklion, which is really expensive. And this would be the most different things.
Listening to you both talk, there really were so many things that you didn't expect, and so many things that presented a burden that required creative solutions. Looking back, what was important and what was maybe not so important? But was there something in the process that maybe at that time it seemed important, but now looking back you think, oh, maybe that wasn't such a big deal after all?
I would say the most important thing is the soft skills, the emotional intelligence related soft skills, which is adaptability and flexibility. Yeah. And another thing is that for me, I was extremely stressed about my career, and still I am, because I was afraid of this 4 years gap. There was no gap, okay? I tried to be productive and publish, and we did it, but still, my PhD was in Berlin, so I had to come in Berlin. It's different, right? At the end, if someone is adaptable and flexible, is much, much more important. And by that time, to answer your question again, what I thought that was important, but apparently it's not important. Yeah, but it's not only for that situation, it's general in our lives. We think that if we organize everything very well, it's gonna work on time. Life is not a box. That's a take-home message. You cannot put your life in a box. It doesn't work like that. It is needed to have a over-ambitious long-term plan, but take it step by step and every day. Otherwise, we will be disappointed for no reason. I think that's very important.
Thank you. Oliver, from your side, looking back, what turned out to be actually something very important and what was maybe not so important?
So I think most important in the whole process would be two persons. So this would be Dietmar Schmitz here in Berlin, because without his eagerness to help her, also to get her, Alexandra to Berlin, it wouldn't be possible. So because, for example, she wouldn't get a work contract, and also getting a lab would be much harder. So he was the person who actually made the starting of the process. And on the other side, the second person was Pagnuta Prevazzi, the lab head in Heraklion, because without her, Alexandra wouldn't have a place to work for 2 years. And so this whole concept of the Entsendung would not be possible. I mean, you cannot just pay somebody a salary without him or her actually working for you. And so the possibility of this workplace increase where Alexandra actually could do experiments was also very important for the whole thing to work.
Thank you. Alexandra, do you know anyone else with a similar situation?
Very unfortunately, no.
So you're the avant-garde. That's why the story is so helpful. Hopefully, even though everyone's situation is unique, perhaps there are some lessons from this situation that might be of use to someone in the future. Alexandra, what advice would you give to another disabled scientist who might want to do their PhD in Berlin or in another city or country?
Well, I think that being a disabled scientist is a challenge by definition, even if you study in your hometown. I think that for students or researchers from Germany, it is challenging, but it is doable because they don't have these obstacles like health insurances, waiting 2 years to be eligible to apply for social care and stuff like that. I'm very sorry to say that, but I'm always honest. It is still a utopia for a foreigner. But this is not only happening in Germany, yeah? Germany, compared to other countries, is by far better, yeah? I love Germany, just to make it clear. At the European or at the worldwide level, it's impossible, yeah, to move abroad if you are in need and to start a new life from scratch and to receive social benefits and to flourish in your career and all of that without delays. There is currently, not only Germany, everywhere, there is no role, there is no an umbrella that covers this topic. There is nothing. So the problem is not on the scientists, yeah? The problem is not on the disabled people. The problem is state-dependent, governmental dependent, or it's a European-dependent problem, I would say. It's not the universities only that should find a solution on this, right? It's a political issue, I would say. I was lucky. I have a great advisor, Dietmar, and his leadership on this issue helped. But he's a scientist, and I'm also a junior scientist. It's not our responsibility. And I mean, it's a big contradiction that makes me angry sometimes. How can you welcome diversity and equity? And how can you make claims that people have rights to work and be productive? But what do you do on this? Nothing.
It's a very interesting point, especially about science, because as you said earlier, being a scientist involves mobility. Mm-hmm. And it needs mobility. It needs exchange with different people from different labs with different perspectives. And yet mobility is really the key problem. It's the difficulty in being able to move from one place to another. It's not the difficulty of being a scientist. It's the difficulty of being able to move from one location to another. That's a structural barrier. Are there, to your knowledge, mechanisms from funding organizations that recognize the extra time that it takes you to do things because of these barriers? Do you get extensions, for example, on grants or contracts?
No, there is nothing. I mean, there is only the special note space, sometimes in applications. Yeah, you can write there down that you have a severe disability and we will take this into account. And I want to tell you a story on this. When I was much, much younger in Greece and I was applying for scholarships, I was trying to hide the fact that I have a disability from my applications in order to see if they will select me based on my excellence. And why I say that? Because initially I was feeling bad to say that I have a disability because I don't want this to define me as a scientist. You know what I mean? I want people to remember me as the person that tries to understand interneurons, not as a disabled Greek student from Charité. But that's a long-term process and it's gonna take years. I think, hopefully one day it's going to be true.
Well, it sounds like you're on a good way to get there.
Yeah,
but now you see advantages, or do you see that it's important to mention that you have a disability?
Yeah, because it's not something that there should be a shame of, because everyone is different. And even if you see, a male scientist, male, white, not disabled, you never know the obstacles and the challenges that everyone experiences, right? Yeah. So the thing is not to be less strict with disabled scientists. The thing is to make sure that they have the same opportunities. That's the thing. And trust me, right now there is nothing. Even for conferences. I remember for any travel grant that I was applying in the past and now to go to a prestigious conference, which is also very good for the CV of a junior scientist, I had to explain that, look, I need to be accompanied by my personal assistant. So please take this care in the amount of money. I mean, there is nothing. Now it's starting with child care grants, with, maternity leave grants and things like that. For disabled scientists, there is nothing.
So it sounds like there is a big, clear need for things to be developed. It's an important step in order to reduce barriers, to understand more specifically what those barriers are. So again, getting this information today is very helpful, and hopefully this information can be fed back to funding organizations so that they can take this into account in how they design their programs. Okay, Oliver, from your perspective, are there any things that universities, for example, could or should change in order to make it easier to hire other disabled scientists in the future? Bearing in mind, of course, that each person's situation is unique, so it's a little bit difficult to generalize, but bearing that in mind, are there any things that you can think about that universities or institutions could do better?
Yes, of course. I'm not so sure about the universities, but what we definitely need to have is this kind of 2 years funding for a scientist, because to get this person into the German welfare system, because you cannot actually expect from a professor, if he or she reads the CV of the scientist and says, okay, I want to work with this person, but I have him or her in my lab. I need to finance him already 2 years where he or she is working abroad. So, in my opinion, actually, I think close to no one is doing this. So, what Dietmar did is quite exceptional. So, you need a possibility to actually fund this gap, to get at least a disabled person from another country the chance to get to Germany. It wouldn't help for a postdoc, for example, because a postdoc only goes 2 years, or one postdoc phase, but at least for scientists with a more long-term perspective to stay somewhere, this would be extremely helpful and actually, I think, a game changer. So the rest is bureaucracy. You can work through this, but this 2 years gap of funding, you need to get somewhere.
That would be a really interesting funding program to have. Thank you for that suggestion. So now, as a final thought, I'd like to ask you each, but Oliver, I'm going to ask you first this time because we've only just come back to you recently here. So can you spontaneously name 5 words that for you best describe this whole process?
Hard, time-consuming, frustrating, but happy ending.
Alexandra, same question. Well, a little bit different. 5 things that you think are needed to get through such a long journey.
Being crazy, being extremely motivated to do science, be ambitious, be persistent, be stubborn, and lucky to have good advisors and mentors.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for this conversation. I'd like to add an adjective of my own, which is inspiring. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.